Hello, so this is another video where I'm going to talk about a little bit about me and what's been going on. I do get the odd email from people who used to follow me saying, what are you doing? Haven't heard much from you lately, all that sort of thing. And I just have to reply that, sorry, I don't seem to be interested in doing much work at the moment. And that's just the size of it. This seems to have been going on for over 2 years. Last year I was thinking, well, this is terrible. Why don't I want to work anymore? I used to spend years and years and years and years helping people. I got a call from a guy the other day who he'd emailed me about 11 years ago with a question about WordPress. I replied to him. He copied the email. It was nice to read what I'd written 11 years ago. It was a random question about WordPress, and I was interested in reading my reply because I'd answered him in quite a lot of detail, but I remember at the time I'd collected snippets of information of frequently asked questions, and I would just copy and paste them into emails so I could reply to emails like that quite quickly. It's something that I just don't do anymore, and people do occasionally ask me for advice and I'll try and give it to them, but usually these days if they're asking about WordPress I'd put them on to someone else. But it was an interesting indication into how my life has changed. I look back to the person who I was 10 years ago and it seems like a different person, and I remember saying that 10 years ago about 10 years before that as well, so maybe this is just something that happens to me. But I wanted to talk a bit about it because I've been talking to that guy that phoned me up from London, who was very interesting to talk to, because he just wanted to know what I'd been doing, and I tried to explain to him that I just stopped working so much within the last 2, 3, 4 years. I think a lot of people had a similar story. The situation might be different. People are recalibrating their lives a little bit, and they're discovering maybe what they were striving for in the past really wasn't as important to them as they thought it was. Money is a great example of that. Maybe you were striving for money before the pandemic and then you discovered that there was more to life, and therefore after the pandemic you're not that inclined to work so hard. Everywhere you look, people are failing to fill positions of employment. With that in mind, I was wanting to contrast the way I felt about this last year and the way I feel about it this year, 2022. As I say, last year I was very worried about it. Started to see therapists and coaches and to read books, just to dial into these emotions that I was having, see if I could shed any light on them, see if I could understand why a business that gave me so much pleasure and a lot of financial gain 1 year didn't hold the same interest for me whatsoever in ensuing years. And I really find that difficult to explain. I still find it difficult to explain to this day. But last year I was kind of exasperated as to why this was happening, and I tried everything in order to find out. And I didn't come up with anything. I would read books by people who are suffering some sort of existential crisis and see if that would help. One of the books I read obviously was this one. I say obviously, this book had been on my radar for years and years and years, but I never read it. I didn't read it because I just didn't want to be upset about what was in the book. But come 2021, and I was tearing my hair out, and so I read it, and it's a really great book. I really would recommend everyone read it. So the book, by the way, it's Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, but it's a very famous book. This isn't going to explain Viktor Frankl's position on the meaning of life, but these are a few of the things I want to highlight. He says, ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. Each man is questioned by life. He can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Now, I'm not quite sure what he means. In other parts of the book, he said, there's no one answer to the meaning of life, but your own life will give you questions that you need to answer. And I think that's quite interesting, because I think he's alluding to the fact that in your life you will stumble into situations and relationships and actions that will cause you to question your life in really fundamental ways. And I really believe that kind of naturally happens to everybody. And if you don't learn the lessons, then these situations keep repeating. I think that's what he's saying. So you have to find your own answers to your own problems. And that's more the meaning of life than some esoteric, mystical sort of aha moment. However, I wanted to contrast it with another quote that I do find useful. And it's a bit more of my sort of 2022, yes, I've got a problem, but I don't care sort of vibe, rather than my 2021 vibe, which was, I've got a problem, let's see what it is and try and work it out. So this is from a guy called Richard Feynman. I think it's Feynman. He was a physicist from New York. He was a very clever guy. He has a quote on the meaning of life, which I thought was interesting. Nobody ever figures out what life is all about. And it doesn't matter. Explore the world. Nearly everything is really interesting if you go into it deeply enough. And I really like that. I really like that. It's so true that nobody really figures out the meaning of life. Well, I bet you could find people who will say, yeah, I know what the meaning of life is. It's this. But there'll be other people that disagree with them. And if they're trying to give you an overarching view of what the meaning of life is for everybody, every human on this planet, and other people disagree with them, well, how do you know if they're right or not? And he says, you don't know, but it doesn't matter, because you should explore the world. And another version of that quote I heard, it said something like, there are a lot of theories about the meaning of life, and a lot of people will talk to you about the meaning of life. I don't think you can be sure if they've ever got it right. However, why don't you just find something you really love to do and then do it? That's making more sense to me at the moment. For some reason, doing WordPress, SEO, email marketing, Black Friday promotions, making courses, it just doesn't interest me at the moment. And it used to. And that's sad. But never mind. Now I find that I get more pleasure from playing guitar with other people and enjoying myself. I can afford my rent to live here for the time being, and I will continue to do this until such time as I've worked out another thing to do to keep me occupied. And it's something like that. So I just thought I'd make another video for people who are contacting me saying, well, what are you doing? You used to do this, you used to do that. Why aren't you doing it anymore? How are you? Really, they're just contacting me to know if I'm all right. And that's really nice, you know. And the answer is yes, 110%. I'm absolutely fine. You know, I have always been, ever since I got to Thailand 8 or 9 years ago, I've always been incredibly happy. Before that, I was pretty happy, although I went through a divorce and obviously I've lost my parents and there have been things like that happening. But by and large, in the last few decades, I've been relatively happy. And there's been periods where I've been really very happy and very content. I hope you enjoyed that. My name's Rob. I'll see you in another video.